Hi, this is Paul Jackson. I'm an archaeologist with Pan American Consultants. And this week I'll be working with our maritime group in Tampa, Florida. So I hope you'll join us for our next Pan American adventure.
Underwater archaeology is often romanticized as maritime archaeologists swimming in luscious clear blue seas among tropical fish and sunken ships with unknown treasure. The reality is often much more different. This reality consists of divers swimming in murky river channels where underwater visibility is minimal, if not completely absent. This week we'll be working alongside our underwater division as they explore several anomalies in portions of Tampa Bay. Through this, you'll get a better picture of just how difficult maritime archaeology is and just how hazardous it can be.
Pan American Consultants has a maritime group that does underwater archaeology for two kinds of cultural resources. Shipwreck or historic resources, which is really what people think of a lot when they think of underwater archaeology. Treasure ships, older ships, earliest Bronze Age shipping in the Mediterranean. I mean, it's what underwater archaeology was really made on. But the second genre that we deal with as a company has to do with protecting the full range of cultural resources. And some cultural resources that are submerged are prehistoric, that is before Columbus came over, and well before actually several thousand years ago when sea levels were different, when water levels, levels in the rivers, levels in the lakes, and sea levels in particular were much further down. The landscape in many places was very different.
Paul, this is just like prehistoric archaeology, but it's in an underwater environment. And the majority of what we do is permit clearance, basically. It gets a project a permit so they can be cleared to conduct it. And here we are in this base setting. And this would be a navigation project. The one we're working on currently is for the Corps of Engineers. They're dredging the channel. And but you know, it could be pipeline, it can be transmission lines across the water, it can be, you know, we do anything and everything, building a dock, building seawalls. It's essentially the same as a terrestrial permit. We look for presence or absence. Our first phase is a remote sensing survey where we drag the electronic equipment and we get certain signals. One, we have the magnetometer.
This is the primary tool of the maritime archaeologist to find submerged sites. This takes an image of the surrounding energy from the Earth's magnetic field and looks for anomalies, either higher on it or lower on it, that will give us a reason to look there.
We look at different signatures and we can tell, you know, this one's no, all these, the majority are no good. These are unknowns, plausible, potentially significant. The side scan sonar, along with the magnetometer, takes an image of the bottom.
What it basically does is emits waves of energy, just like light, off either side of the fish. There are grooves on either side that emit that energy, and it gives us basically a backscattered image of anything on the seafloor. They use this kind of thing to find bodies, shipwrecks, you name it.
As you might imagine, finding a shipwreck is a lot easier than locating a prehistoric site underwater. However, new strategies and technologies are beginning to improve our chances of locating these sites, even in the murkiest of environments.
Finding submerged prehistoric sites is kind of the exact opposite. Is that we have to predict the landscape features where we think a site might be, and then we go look for those landscape features in a sense. And so the third device that we use for that is sub-bottom profiler. And that is, again, an acoustic device that penetrates the bottom and lets us see stratigraphic variation. Projects we've worked on in Florida, several of them right now, have been real cutting edge. They've come real fast, one right after another. And each one is in an environment that's kind of special. So this geologic environment we're here in Tampa Bay has already produced many middle archaic 7,000 to 5,000 year old artifacts from dredge spoil. So we know they're out there when the sea levels are lower. We're by a relic channel system that's been dredged for the modern navigation channel. So we know we're closer to where the sites would be. And we have certain features we found on the landscape with remote sensing that we feel have higher, that we had determined have higher probability for being archaeological features. They're bigger, they're mounds, for instance, here. We have a sinkhole that we're checking out. And so what we're going to be doing is investigating each of these areas, probing, seeking out exposures of the strata in the navigation cut to see what these sub-bottom feature signatures are and to see if there's artifacts in the materials coming up out of them. We can do the same hydroprobe that we might use to find a wreck. We can probe down with a jet of water, and we can feel differences in the sediment boundaries to know if we want to open a bigger exposure to test. And we can use the dredge to dig down. The water dredge, or the induction dredge, hydraulic dredge we call them, that we see in this project we're working on right now.
The induction dredge, an ingeniously simple tool, works primarily by lifting sediments and materials off the surface of the river or sea floor and sucks them into a small opening and collects them into a bag at the back end of the device. The dredge uses a water pump to inject water at a 45-degree angle into a straight cylinder of PVC. This water flow creates a vortex that produces suction in the pipe that literally pulls the material up through the dredge into the cloth bag on the other end.
In this particular project, what we would expect to find, say in the midden features or the mounded features that we think might be cultural, would be disarticulated shell pieces that are apart from each other and in the soil, in the sediment. We won't be actually able to see how they're laying in the sediment, but they'll be being sucked up for sampling, and we'll see them. There would probably not be very many chipstone flint artifacts. There might be a projectile point or some flakes here and there, but usually in the mounds, they're pretty rare. Burned bone would be good. Burned shell, the difference between burned shell and not burned shell. Charcoal. And then the Middle Archaic people were very fond around here in Tampa Bay of making columella tools out of univalve shells. What are those called? Strombus gigas are they called. And they make hammers out of them, and they make awls, and they make adze things, all out of the shell, because there's not very much chipstone. A little bit more here in Tampa, but they're still using a lot of shell for their tools. So we've got a problem in the sense where we're sucking up shell from the bottom of the bay, where there's a lot of shell in the bottom of the bay, and in situations that could be prehistoric or could be natural. And so we're going to have a real challenge to make sure that we're disciplined in our way of looking at the artifacts, that we're not saying, oh, this is important, when it might be equivocal. We want to get to the places where we're unequivocal. And the importance of that for the research community is that there is very little, there's been little remote sensing done on specifically to submerged prehistoric sites, and then testing phases to go after them. Because people in the past have feared high cost, because university researchers haven't had the backing or the interest necessarily to do this kind of research, such that the cultural resource management community in this sense is at the right place at the right time to be able to do this. And our colleagues will be able to use the data to expand how they look at the remote sensing and how they go look at the sites and test them. Both of those are in development.
As the project continues, the Pan American Maritime Division will continue diving on the anomalies recognized by the sub-bottom profiler. Whether these anomalies are naturally formed or man-made will only be determined by actually diving on them. I hope this brief glimpse into our Maritime Division has given you a better picture of how underwater archaeology is actually conducted and how difficult it can truly be. And I hope you'll join us for our next Pan American adventure.